It's among the most significant social change ever proposed in Arkansas. Should adults be allowed to legally possess and use marijuana? Millions of dollars are being spent to sway your vote. Millions more are at stake for the winning side, and public opinion is split. Now, KATV is on your side, getting answers to the questions you are asking. This is our digital town hall on recreational marijuana.
Well, hello and welcome to this KATV Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. I'm Chris May. Our focus is on an issue that has divided Arkansans right now. Should we amend our Constitution to allow for the recreational use of marijuana among adults in this state? Voters will decide with a yes or no vote on issue 4. Today, we are joined by 3 experts who really cover the whole spectrum of this issue. Eddie Armstrong is the CEO and chairman of the Chicago-based Cannabis Capital Group and one of the driving forces behind Responsible Growth Arkansas, which advocates for issue 4. Melissa Foltz is a local cannabis advocate. She helped successfully pass the 2016 measure legalizing medicinal marijuana in Arkansas. However, she is an opponent of issue 4. And finally, Jerry Cox is the founder and president of the conservative education and research organization Family Council, which has consistently opposed the loosening of marijuana laws in the state. We will hear from all of them in just a few moments. But first, let's look back at how we got to this point. Issue 4's path to the ballot was not an easy one. In fact, the question of whether it would be presented to voters at all went all the way to the Arkansas Supreme Court. The first step in the process involved Responsible Growth Arkansas canvassing the state. The group gathered more than 193,000 signatures to place a constitutional amendment on the ballot. And after its review, the Secretary of State's office confirmed they had reached the number of valid signatures required by law. But in August, the State Board of Election Commissioners rejected the ballot title for issue 4, concerned that it did not fully explain to voters the impact of the amendment. As an example, the commissioners cited a section that would repeal the state's current limit on how much THC, which is the active component in marijuana, is allowed in edible products. Responsible Growth Arkansas then appealed that decision, asking the state Supreme Court to order the measure onto the ballot. And that led to September's historic decision by the High Court. The justices overturning the state panel's decision to block that measure from the ballot. Justice Robin Wynn saying in that ruling, quote, "The people will decide whether to approve the proposed amendment in November." And that leads us to where we are today with a decision in the hands of the people. And the people trying to convince the people are with us now. Thank you all for being here with us today. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Eddie, you needed to gather a little more than just 89,000 votes to qualify for the ballot. You turned in more than 193,000 signatures. What does that say about the appetite among Arkansans to at least have the option to vote on this question?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Chris, for having us on today and respecting the opinions of those that are against this. But it says a lot about the current momentum, not only across the state of Arkansas, but across our country. Right now, over 90% of Americans, a very far-fetched number, but 90% of Americans would like to see legalized recreational cannabis legalized in most states across our country. Right now, we have 19 states that have medical marijuana legalized, and you've seen 58.5% of people that were asked if indeed the vote were taken tomorrow, they would vote for recreational cannabis in our state. So I think it simply says that the people would like to see this, and we've done all the work to get it to the people. And we just hope that in November they will turn out to the polls and let their voices be heard. Our state motto, simply Regnus Populus, speaks to that. So it is the people's opportunity here. And whether you agree or disagree with it, individuals have a choice in their homes, and what our measure simply does is will allow for people over 21 to be able to purchase products at our recreational cannabis shops, as those that you've seen that are able to purchase medical marijuana. But it does a lot of unique good things for our state. We've been in arguments about the cost for the bad versus the cost for the good. Our message is simple. Law enforcement needs support with bringing new personnel to the state in all of our small and large towns across the state. We don't want this grown in homes and potentially having the access for kids to get a hold of it if it is homegrown. We are focusing on packaging and making certain that it is safe and secure for our children. we're providing something that I think is really, really, really important, and that is the critical funding needed for cancer research here. If indeed we are able to receive that cancer accreditation, we will be able to take care of those that need their most critical needs met right here in our state without having to leave. Those tax dollars stay in state. And last but not least, from our governor candidates to our current governor, everyone is concerned about job creation. This brings in 6,000 plus new jobs to the state, and we would like for the people to be able to make a choice on that and the benefits of this medicine of the future.
Jerry, I've gleaned from some of your comments on this issue that in addition to your general opposition to marijuana use, you're also concerned with some of the things that this issue would place in the Constitution of Arkansas. What are those?
That is exactly right. And let me speak to this whole thing of how many people signed the petition and all that. They signed a petition for a concept, not for this particular amendment, because they never had the chance really, or most of them didn't read it when they just signed the petition. So when you look at the amendment, it is scary. It is fatally flawed. And what you realize is the marijuana industry crafted this amendment, wrote themselves into the Constitution, and guess what? They wrote the legislature out of being able to regulate it. They wrote local governments out of being able to zone it. And guess what else? They set their own tax rate, about half what it is in the state of Colorado. So this idea that we're going to have a big tax windfall, it ain't happening. That's just window dressing put there to give people something to say in a campaign ad. When day is done, we don't even know how much funding there's going to be for the police. They set a stipend. Well, that's some little amount, but nobody knows what that is. And so it's important that people understand that they're not just voting on an idea, they're voting on an amendment to the Constitution that will create a monopoly for a small number of people. And we don't need to do it that way.
I'll let you respond. Let me bring Melissa in though real quick as well, because Melissa, you've been in that same chair advocating for medicinal marijuana in the past.
And for recreational.
And I know that you support recreational as well, but you're opposed to Amendment 4.
I am.
Why? Or
and
Issue 4.
I never thought I'd hear myself agree with Jerry.
Right.
But we do.
But we do. And there are a lot of flaws in this. As he talked about the taxes, yes, there will be money that will go to UAMS, but it's actually going to be less than what they were taxing the patients, which I do not want the patients taxed. My biggest concern, my absolute biggest concern with this is they have not added any other cultivators other than, you know, they start talking about, oh, we're putting 12 more on there. No, they're not. Those 12 grow 250 plants. That's a total of 3,000 plants. The smallest cultivator grows in excess of 20,000 plants. They are having a difficult time keeping products on the shelves, serving the patients. So what's going to happen when they add this other 300,000 consumers? They still only have 8 cultivators, and these little 12, 250 plant cultivators. What's going to happen? The quality is going to go down because they're going to have to rush to get the product out. The prices are going to go up. The patients are going to be hurt. The patients only get to use the original 40 dispensaries, or they have to pay the sales tax. So we have patients that have to drive in excess of 2 hours right now. They're still going to have to drive 2 hours. Why couldn't they open all the dispensaries up for everybody, for patients to be able to have better access and add some cultivators so that we have more product where patients don't worry so much about, when I go in there, am I going to have this particular strain that I need? Because we don't all need the highest THC you can come up with.
You think this is going to kill the medical marijuana program?
It is. It's going to hurt patients. And as you know, for the last 12 years, I have fought tooth and nail to protect the patients. This will hurt the patients. It will hurt the state. And as much as I'm for recreational, I am so much against this one, it's not even funny.
Okay, a lot to unpack there, but I'll let you respond to what you'd like to respond to there.
First things first, in responding to Mr. Cox's statement, you know, I'm a child of this state, a university graduate. I'm raising my child here now. And gone are the days of us scaring our consumers or the general public into thinking that the sky is falling. Mr. Cox said the same thing about the slippery slope we were headed down in 2016, when in fact, The 89,000 patients that are currently buying these products off of the shelves of our medical marijuana dispensaries aren't complaining. I have a sister at home right now that's fought back from fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, acute pain, and she has not had to leave the state to find any of the strands. Indeed, we did look at this with ABC, with the Attorney General's office, with law enforcement. This was not cooked up in the middle of the night. We covered and dotted all of our I's, crossed our T's in the midst of COVID, in the midst of new regulations on how we even collected signatures in this state, making certain that each signature was collected with somebody that met a criminal background check, and they were paid in state. So we brought dollars in state and employed people first. And now we're saying that the money won't be there. Well, let's just look at what the medical program has done thus far. We're bringing in over $20 million on a regular basis month to month. It was already underscored that we would only have 20,000 patients in the medical market. We have 89,000 patients. Over that time frame, $19 million has gone for this cancer accreditation. Another $27 million was appropriated by the General Assembly. Another $26 million came out of that, for a total of $72 million, Mr. Cox, on a $96 million ask to our General Assembly to help with this cancer accreditation. So when we talk about the good that has been done, you know, look no further than what we've been able to accomplish with our medical program. And to Ms. Foltz, you know, there's been a lot of mistruths out here, some name calling. She just even said she didn't ever believe she would be on the side of right with Mr. Cox. This isn't a bad thing. This is indeed actually a good thing when we talk about job creation. When they say that it was only created by a few people in this industry that are trying to monopolize on it, we're expanding the market. You will now have craft grows, no different than Diamond Bear Beer, located right in North Little Rock, that can focus on lower yield, higher quality products that our patients and or customers may want. I just came back from Chicago, Illinois, spent 3 years after the legislature living there and watching them implement this, and we did not see a drop off of tremendous fallout of medical patients being able to access what they wanted and new recreational cannabis customers consuming it or buying it when they want it, for tourism purposes or just being residents of the state of Illinois. We're not Illinois, we're not Colorado, we are Arkansas, and we deserve a chance to have a choice at the ballot box.
If I may, in responding to that, what this amounts to is a takeover of the medical marijuana program in Arkansas by big marijuana companies. Because if you look at how they defined cannabis, that definition of cannabis includes anything you could ever make from a marijuana plant. That's hemp, CBD oil, all of that. They are taking over the entire industry, and it's creating this monopoly.
The interveners made that statement, and the Supreme Court shot that down.
The hemp growers will tell you that's what's going to happen. The CBD oil people will tell you that's what's going to happen. They see the writing on the wall, and we do too. And I would urge people to read the amendment. And if you read the amendment, you'll understand what we're talking about.
This does put current cultivators and dispensary owners kind of at the front of the line for the first licenses that will come out. So when people say that this is building a monopoly to a potentially multi-billion-dollar industry in this state, how do you respond to that?
What would you prefer? Illinois, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Oklahoma, bringing more products into our state that we don't have uniform lab testing rules now at the federal level. It's not been legalized at a federal level. This is for Arkansans and by Arkansans, and I believe that that's the way we should approach this. When you look at the current cultivators in the marketplace and the dispensaries and the ancillary businesses that have contributed to this campaign, both labs, banks, legal personnel have all been contributors to this. It's not done just by one small set group of folks. I think that we have an opportunity here to expand this in a responsible and well-regulated way that depresses the black market and allows for customers and consumers to come into our state and purchase this legally under the guise of our government control, not the control of the industry. This still has to go to the legislature, and I believe Ms. Foltz in some of our intimate fireside chats once said she has no trust in the legislature. Well, as a former legislator, that says a lot to me because I wear that badge proud. I know how tough it is to make laws in this state. Whether you're a party of one or the other, it's tough to make our laws that fit everybody's needs. I would hope that people look at this opportunity and say, not one size fits everybody, but the people do have a choice, and we want to give them that choice in November to make their voices heard.
Melissa?
Again, they're having a hard time keeping up with the demand with 8 cultivators.
Has that been in the news?
Just wait a minute. I'm a patient, I know. I've been to them. Another problem that I have, they can own up to 18 dispensaries. Do you realize that up between 7 and 8 people could actually control the entire industry? And before, it had to be 70% Arkansas owned. With this, it doesn't. All the money can come from out of state and go right back out of state.
Completely misinformation.
No, it's not.
Up to 5% of those that own, they don't have to show their backgrounds here. But to take this information public, if you're watching, I would encourage you, as Mr. Cox has said, please read the amendment. Please understand that this is not something that we're trying to scare people into. We have done this in a very transparent way. We expected to take on the opposition. We expected that everyone would not be for this. This is indeed the buckle of the Bible Belt. We would be one of the first states in history to do this, and we've already accomplished some immeasurable goals by getting this through the Supreme Court. So now it's time for the people to decide once again.
And they will decide. But it's important to point out that Melissa is correct. It removes the residency requirements, and that is a big deal. We don't know who's going to own these facilities, where they're going to live, what they're all about. It's wide open.
So let me get this
when we
correct.
refer to one size fits all, this is one size fits all. They wrote the amendment and said the legislature can't regulate it, communities can't zone it, you can't tax it. They set their own tax rate. People need to understand that, and they set it really low.
Eddie mentioned a slippery slope a moment ago. It was 6 years that we were here first talking about medical marijuana and expanded casino gaming. They're now realities in Arkansas. You would argue that is a slippery slope, that we've gotten to this point now.
Yeah, because we said when the medical marijuana measure passed, they said they'll be right back wanting to do recreational. And guess what? Here they are. And people said medical is all we need. And I do think anybody who wants to use marijuana in Arkansas can do so. They can do so through the medical program. People that need it, Melissa and I have talked about that. But it is one size fits all, and it's being forced on us by the industry.
With respect to marijuana as medicine, and certainly it does help people, but was that the idea behind medicinal, to open this door, to make it a little more normal for people in Arkansas?
To tell you the honest truth, when I fought so hard to get medical, I never thought I would fight for recreational. The only reason I fight for recreational is, number one, I'm tired of seeing people go to prison for a plant. But more than that, the recreational should be there to protect the patients. And before I was interrupted a minute ago, there are several things that are a problem. It does open it up to where it can be taken over by out-of-state, and there are huge out-of-state groups that will come in and take it over. They also, their employees have to have background checks. Anybody that owns over 5% has to have background checks. I don't understand why if you have 5% or less, you don't have to have a background check. That's another problem. There are other problems that I see in it, that there's no expungement. They're going to be making millions of dollars, while people that were arrested for small amounts of marijuana still have their lives destroyed. And I had this argument, and he said, oh, well, the legislature will change it. Please, the legislature isn't going to change this. They don't even want medical marijuana. They wouldn't even add qualifying conditions. Do you really think they're going to expunge someone's felony for having a small amount of marijuana? No, they won't. And it wouldn't have taken anything to have put an expungement in here to let those people have their lives back. These are people that if they go for a job interview, they have to mark that little box that they have a felony for marijuana charges. That's wrong on so many levels.
Okay, I want to dig into that and other questions about what is in issue 4 in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at the finances of this. We know the merits of legalizing recreational marijuana are up for debate here, but the economic impact of such a move is a little more plain to see. Our senior political reporter, Maureen Glisovic, now joins us with the amount of money that cannabis sales could generate in Arkansas.
This November, Arkansas voters will vote on recreational marijuana use in the state. But whether you agree with adult use or not, Responsible Growth Arkansas, the group behind this ballot question, wants voters to understand the economic impacts.
A vote for this is a vote for safer communities, stronger law enforcement uptick, cancer research accreditation, job creation, and as you've seen today, it bolsters our economy, which is really important for a state of 3 million people.
Recreational use will be taxed up to 20%. And according to the Arkansas Economic Development Institute, that means more than $460 million collected in tax revenue. Chief Economist Michael Paco.
Our primary source of data were from other states who have gone through the experience of switching from a medical marijuana regime to an adult use cannabis. And so we tried to project what demand would be in Arkansas given our state's population and income. And then just to project from there, once we know what the total demand is going to be, it's a simple matter of applying tax rates to the data and estimating what the fiscal impact would be of those sales.
Out of the tax revenue collected, $210 million would be new general revenue. $45 million plus will go to law enforcement stipends, $30 million to UAMS cancer research, and $15 million to support drug courts.
A lot of money involved in this business. I mean, we're looking at it growing to be nearly $1 billion industry within 5 years, and that generates revenue through taxes as well.
Maureen Glisovic for us. Thanks very much. The Cato Institute has produced regular reports since Washington and Colorado first approved recreational marijuana in those states back in 2012. And they have found pretty consistently that these plans never live up to their loftiest promises, but nor do they deliver on their most dire predictions, except in one case, and that is the finances. It produces millions and millions of dollars in tax revenue. And Jerry, some of these taxes seem destined for good causes.
Well, let me comment on that. You're right. They overpromise, underdeliver every single time. You have to measure the overall cost of something like this. In Colorado, there is a study right now that says for every dollar they collect in tax revenue, they spend $4.50 mitigating all the problems that recreational marijuana has brought. So you can't just measure it by how many tax dollars come in. How do you measure a person who becomes an addict? How do you measure a death on the highway? How do you measure kids at school that lose their future? How do you measure that in terms of loss to a community? But mark my words, if we pass this, there will be loss to every community in this state, and I don't want to see it happen.
I respect Jerry. I grew up here in the 90s. I've lost friends to jail, to death. Have you lost them in your communities?
I've lost people
in
to
your
addiction.
in your communities?
Yes, sir.
To weed?
Yes, sir.
Death?
Yes, sir.
Jail? In your neighborhood?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
My point to this is that everybody cannot have everything. We have had conversations with Melissa, Normal, others across the state that were not in agreement with this. I am so grateful that she is a matriarch of the medical marijuana movement. Without it, we would not be able to even address the opportunity to have recreational cannabis in our state. So hats off to you. My apologies for interrupting you earlier, but there is not a one-size-fits-all. And my simple statement is this: why shouldn't Arkansans take the opportunity, Jerry and Melissa, to properly regulate this and implement it in a responsible and reasonable way, regardless of the lack of faith in the legislature, which is a slap in my face every time, and I work with people that do not agree with me, but we get good things done for our state, or at least we used to. The second portion of this, as it relates to the expungement process, and I've explained this, it's really difficult when you start to talk about expungement without the process of sealing those records and giving people a pathway to work. So we're only going to, if we were to do it that way, promise people something that would indeed be a false hope. They had to open up several legal aid funds, find resources and revenue in order to make certain that if indeed, and we've seen from our Department of Corrections, our numbers are low on the number of people actually incarcerated for weed crimes in the state of Arkansas. It escalates to gun charges or high latent crimes, things that our law enforcement truly needs to fight. But for us to say that there's no faith that the legislature would focus on a proper process with $202 million in general revenue, and that's the low end of this anticipated economic study, why can't funds be dedicated towards a social equity fund that really truly starts to look at unpacking and rebuilding and reinvesting in our communities, making certain that if we do indeed expunge their records, we seal their records, and then we provide them a pathway into the Arkansas workforce. That is something that we ought to be looking at, and that's something that I intend to work on and work towards post this election, because the work isn't yet done. There's lots to do, but we have none of that if indeed the voters don't have a chance to decide and make this recreationally legal.
Okay, let's look at some of the things that are in issue 4. It requires child-proof packaging and also restricts advertising that appeals to children. Will that be enough to protect kids?
Let me make a
already in
correction.
there
It says
for the
child
medical.
resistant. It doesn't say child proof. That's the shrewd way that people worded this. There's a difference between the two. And when people read resistant, they think proof, but you have to read the words.
What does the pill bottle say right now? If you open up oxycodone or hydrocodone and my kid gets into that, is that proof or resistant?
There's a federal standard about what it means to be childproof.
So why wouldn't we do the same at the state level? You want us to wait on the federal government?
The amendment doesn't do that.
Okay, it exempts individuals who own cultivation centers or dispensaries from criminal background checks as long as their ownership stake is less than 5%. Why is that?
That's my question. Why is that?
Why is
Your
that?
employees have to have a background
We
check.
wanted to make certain that if you were indeed an out-of-state investor, you didn't have to fight through the rigors of meeting a criminal background check. I think this was raised, again, by the interveners, and the Supreme Court decided otherwise. If you indeed want to be a part of the Arkansas regulated market and you're an investor from out of state, following through the criminal background checks is something that we didn't want to impede them with. However, you still have to show your W-2s. You still will have to show your tax ID. You still will have to provide your social security number. It still will be regulated by ABC. It still will be regulated in the state. So there are several other guardrails to make certain that we don't again have people out here fearful that a criminal enterprise is going to come in and take over our recreational cannabis market.
The amendment allows people to have a financial interest in up to 18 non-medical marijuana dispensaries, which seems like a lot. And if you owned less than 4% of 18 non-medical marijuana dispensaries, that seems like a lot of ownership and to not have to undergo a criminal background check.
Well, I say to those that want to invest in this industry, for people that don't understand this, it's a very cash-intensive industry. This is a state of 3 million people with not a lot of people with a ton of cash or money sitting around. So if you're a serious player and you truly want to get into this industry, you better make certain that you've got the financial wherewithal to be in this industry, because it is going to be something over years to come that you see consumed and really locked tight on. I think that we were trying to find a reasonable and responsible way for those Arkansans that truly wanted to get invested in this industry to do so, and we tried to make certain that we listened to the demands of those out there that said they needed it, and expanded in a way that we brought forth a number of new stores that would be considerable and a number of craft grows that would be considerable, and that you could invest in this industry in a meaningful way.
Eddie mentioned this earlier. It does repeal the Arkansas residency requirement for owners. Does that concern you?
Well, and he said exactly one of my concerns. He said when people from out of state want to come in, they don't want to have to do a background check. So that shows us that this is not going to be an Arkansas business any longer. It's going to be these other groups that are taking over the entire nation for the industry. There's just a few of them, and they're taking over the entire industry. So that money's going to go right back out of the state because they don't live in this state.
I wish I was fortunate to own one of these facilities, but when I talk to growers from Cotton Plant or Berryville, Arkansas, or Whitehall, or Grady, Arkansas, true blue Arkansans, farmers, former pilots, you know, really working every day to make certain that we're getting this out there in a responsible and well-regulated way. They need our help, and I think that if we tend to listen to what everyone wants, we couldn't have ever gotten this far. And the Supreme Court would have had to make a decision, you're right, on THC levels, on the fact that if we do home grows, what communities and what neighborhoods and what districts and zones can we indeed do that? I don't know how we answer all of the sides of the opposition when indeed we have had a successful medical program that we predicted only 20,000 Arkansans would participate in, and we're well beyond that now. So why not at this juncture open it up for other people to be able to access this medicine.
Jerry.
I want to talk about who's going to regulate this. Not the legislature, not your city council, not your county quorum court. It's a 5-member alcoholic beverage control board appointed by the governor of Arkansas. They're not elected. They're not responsive to the voters. It's a 5-person board that was put there to really deal with alcohol issues, not marijuana. And now all of a sudden, this entire thing is dumped in their lap. And I just think, why would you not let the legislature regulate this?
Who will you be voting for this November for governor?
I'm going to be voting for the best candidate. I tell you, that's who I'm going to be voting for.
Here's my point to that.
And now, let me finish making my point. My point is this. Why would you not let our duly elected officials help regulate this? If this thing goes sideways and all the wheels fall off, they can't fix it. And you all have made it that way.
Well, you'd soon say the same about our agriculture industry, and I'm a big believer in ag because it built Arkansas. I come from Tyson Foods days, and before we had a Department of Agriculture, I didn't hear Jerry Cox talking about unregulating our chickens. Or how much nutrients is being put into that.
Chickens.
Well, guess what? A lot of people in my neighborhood like chicken, and they eat it a lot. But my point is this:
well, go ahead.
Is that when he says there are no uniform regulatory parameters, we have a legislative oversight committee in place right now that senators and representatives serve on to make certain that they're looking at things like how it's tracked, how it's lab tested, how it's labeled. ABC is trying to beef up to regulate this in a meaningful way. ABC needs funding and support. We yet to have gotten to the stage, again, if we don't legalize this, where we can see a medical or a recreational cannabis division of our state created to support ABC and legislative oversight. So when he says that there's no legislative oversight, that's a mistruth. And again, a scare tactic, I think, for voters to believe that we're running away with this thing. We have to answer to somebody, and everybody that has an industry here, whether it be raising cows and chickens, growing our soybeans and rice, we're now looking at cannabis, and we should regulate that and take that to the legislature the same way we did when we created the Arkansas Department of Agriculture.
I'm not even going to go there. It is going to be regulated, but we need to talk about the real problems with this, not whether it's regulated or not, because it is going to be regulated. Another one of the problems is there no protection for employees. They put in a protection for employers, but nothing to protect employees. So, okay, you can buy an ounce of marijuana, but you may not have a job because of it. The problem is they set it up where any employer can say, this is a drug-free zone. And don't get me wrong, I don't want anybody on anything if they're at work. I don't want them on pills, alcohol, marijuana, anything. But the problem with marijuana is if you have one gummy or smoke one joint for 30 days, it's going to show up positive in your system. So any employer that doesn't want to have that employee there anymore or doesn't want to hire that employee anymore can drug test them, and they're gone. Even if they do not have any cognitive problems at all, if they are not under the influence, this gives employees no protection. So what if it's legal?
I'm looking at
If you're going to get fired from your job, you're not going to be able to pay for it anyway.
Do you believe marijuana is addictive?
I do not believe it's addictive.
You do not.
I look at that no different than I look at, our alcohol problems of the world. We asked Jerry this in a recent debate, how he felt about alcohol and prohibition. I think he said we don't want to create one more, I forget his exact term, but neither here nor there. What I am looking at is the litany of things that are wrong versus the short amount of things that we can do to really move our state in a forward direction. Providing new resources to our general revenue at the tune of $202 million is huge. $40 million to cancer research accreditation is astronomical. $30 million to bolster being able to help our law enforcement hire the proper police and RSOs that we need to put in our schools is tremendous. $15 million for drug courts to really start fixing some of the things. And not only one time is this going to happen, it's in the Constitution so that this continuation of capital or resources are there for these entities to benefit from. not this list of we can't home grow, workforce is having a problem. Well, the workforce issue is a federal issue. And companies that want to hire or have truck drivers out here from J.B. Hunt to Walmart to Tyson Foods, they have to deal with that right now. There's a big gray area there, but indeed, yes, they can fire them. Putting this all in a constitutional amendment and holding that to the stake when we have a chance to go and work through these processes in each legislative session with whomever the next governor may be is something that's really important to me. It's not a perfect fit, but it's one going in the right direction, and I feel we've done that.
Cigarettes come with warning labels. Casinos put out 800 numbers for people who might have gambling problems. Are there any accommodations made through Issue 4 for people who might develop drug habits?
Absolutely. You want education and advocacy at the forefront of this. We don't want what people are throwing out there, you know, people addicted to weed leads to addiction of opioids. In fact, we've lost friends to that, but we don't want that. We want to be able to say, hey, what does it look like for proper packaging in Arkansas? What's our statement going to be? What 1-800 number do we have if people want to call? No longer is it 911, I believe it's 988 if you're a mental health case and you've got a problem. You don't have to call our law enforcement officers to divert them to a patient that may be, you know, on fentanyl or something drastic. They can now continue to fight heinous crimes while we're focusing, and Kirk Lang is very aware of this, while we're focusing on the things that really matter. So there is a lot of work to be done, but in the short term, I feel that we're doing some great things for the state, and it just makes good business sense if you're an Arkansan and you want to go vote for recreational cannabis.
Short on time, but go ahead quickly.
All right, the money aside, because any recreational ability is going to create this. The problem is the problems with this amendment. You cannot ever expand it. It is 8 cultivators and 12 mini cultivators, 120 dispensaries. It can never grow. So if you have these 300,000 consumers and you have the 90,000 patients, and I told them all along it's going to be closer to 100,000 patients, nobody listened to me, and I was right. But my problem is none of this can grow. So what happens if we have 300,000 or 400,000 consumers? There's not going to be enough product. So what's going to happen? The quality is going to go down. The prices are going to go up. People are going to lose their jobs because there's absolutely nothing in here to protect employees. They've set it up where you don't have to have a background check for 5% or under, yet your employees have to have background checks. There's not, there are just so many things that I see wrong with this. Being able to own up to 18 dispensaries, 18 out of 120. Like I said, if this passes, up to 7 to 8 people can own the entire industry, and it can never go any further. Okay. It can never have any changes.
Our time is short. Let me ask quickly, the current governor has come out in opposition to this. Just today, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the front runner for governor, said she'll vote against Issue 4. Chris Jones, the Democratic nominee, supports the measure, as does Ricky Harrington, the Libertarian candidate. A lot of money's being spent to sway voters. How do you all see this vote turning out on November 8th,
Let me add to what you just said. I was in a meeting just last night with about 48 people representing about 25 business, industry, drug rehab, all kinds of groups. And you're going to see the chamber have a loud voice against this. You're going to see Farm Bureau. If this was about farmers, why would Farm Bureau be against it? And you're going to see a litany of people come out because they've read the amendment.
So the vote will end how?
I think it's going to be defeated by the people of Arkansas once they learn what it's about.
Melissa?
I hope people will take the time to actually read it, and I think if they read it, it will fail.
Eddie?
Absolutely 100% it's going to pass. We have put in the work. The people have spoken. 190,000 people. Come on. I mean, now let's take this to them and allow them the opportunity to vote for this. Indeed, legalizing cannabis is for consumer safety, regulated consumer safety at that. This meeting he talks about last night done in private, we knew all along that we would face opposition, it's now time to take it to the people, and we hope that they will get a chance to let their voices be heard in November.
This has been a spirited and passionate debate that will continue. We thank you all for your views and your time, and we'll see what the voters have to say on November 8th. Great to be with all of you. Jerry Cox with Family Council, Melissa Foltz, Eddie Armstrong. We thank them, and we thank you for your time. The voters, again, will have the final say. And don't forget, early voting in Arkansas begins October 24th. Election Day is November 8th. Go to the polls and make your voice heard. I'm Chris May. Good night.